How are you?
Hi. I'm doing fine.
So
We're gonna talk about things today that are in the news.
I know, right? So the did you see for us is there's a lot of stuff that's been in that media space about post pandemic,
That's right.
and recognizing that there actually does seem to be a light at the end of the tunnel for this, and obviously we'll look back on that statement in a few months and see what's what. But I guess for us is that when we are talking to leaders and working with organizations, what are some of those top thoughts or top tips that could come from either of us around as you move into that post pandemic, as we're moving into this new space? What are the things to hold in your mind as you move into that space? So we've
Yeah,
had a little chat before, and we've both got some things that we think are probably worth sharing and having
yeah,
a conversation about.
yeah. The last time I was asked this question, incidentally, was after the 2007 2008 financial crash. And the question was, what should leadership do now?
Hmm.
And I ever so slightly frustrated people by saying nothing different at all, provided you've got a handle on what good leadership looks like. Because good leadership, I tried to argue at the time, and I'm going to say exactly the same thing about post-pandemic. Good leadership is good leadership. So there's an issue about setting direction. There's an issue about performing in getting the operation to work slickly. There's an issue about getting the people signed up on board, aligned and motivated and looked after, and so on. And although the provocations and the hindrances to getting those things done change, the intention shouldn't change at all. The things that look after the strategic domain, the things that look after the operational domain, the things that look after the interpersonal domain, should be attended to, whatever that is happening around us, whether it's a pandemic, post-pandemic, through the pandemic, financial crisis, after the financial crisis, before the financial crisis.
Yeah.
The good leadership is good leadership.
Yeah, and that's almost like the captain of the boat sails the boat regardless of the sea that they're in.
Exactly. If we're trying to get to Rio de Janeiro, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter which way the wind's blowing. I've still got to set my sails somehow to get to Rio de Janeiro. So I might need to react to the circumstances around me, but by and large, that doesn't necessarily have to change my purpose.
And I like that. I think there's something about staying connected to, I call it the craft of leadership. I'm sure you reference it in that way, more or less as well. But it's that idea of, it's in some respects it's nothing new. If you look at the history of any organization, any business, any culture, country, there's always an ebb and a flow. There's calm and there's tsunamis to a greater or lesser degree. And the reality is that we're on a path, and it's the craft of it, and it's the commitment to the excellence of it, and the getting better at it, and the learning as you go, that just says in this, we're in this particular moment in time, and next month it will, well, not unfortunately, but it will be something else.
That's right. But the thing, well, I think the pandemic has done, interested in your take on this as well. My view is that what the pandemic has done is it hasn't qualitatively changed anything that was happening before it. But what it has done is it has accelerated a bunch of changes that were already in train, but it's massively hit the accelerator so that now they're moving much faster. So, for example, the whole, working from home, or where do I work? That was an issue before the pandemic. It was certainly an issue during the pandemic, and it's going to be an issue again after the pandemic. But what the pandemic has done is it's made us realize that an awful lot more may be possible than we'd given credit to before. And it's accelerated the pressure for people to have more choice about location, about where they work. It hasn't qualitatively changed that, but it has accelerated it.
Yeah, I think if I was going to say what are the big focuses that have happened here, one is trust and that relationship, and we've done an episode on trust. But I think the way organizations have or haven't trusted, or have had to trust, and whether or not they're going to try and take that back, interestingly enough, will be, I think, a real indicator for people as to whether or not, I mean, if they can vote with their feet, but whether or not they want to be working within an organization. If we've done that for a year and it's worked, if there are freedoms, might not be the right word. Actually, I think I heard somebody saying freedoms. I don't know if that's the right word, because it's almost, it's not about that. But if I've been given the space or the expectation or the license to operate or whatever it is, why would you take that back off me?
Yes.
That's
a really good question, but that's completely consistent with what I'm saying too, because trust was always an issue.
Yeah.
And if you don't trust people, you have to get quite draconian in how you check up on them. But then good people leave you because they don't want that.
Yeah.
So you're left with the blonkers, that you're not sure you can trust, and therefore you've got to control. So the point is that the pandemic has accelerated that
Yes.
kind of consideration and brought it more into prominence. But it's not a qualitatively different; it's a quantitatively different issue. I'll give you another example. I think is that I was writing a book about work-life stuff, and the book is not out yet, but it's called Work-Life Matters. And what I was researching was a chapter on the future of work. And one of the reports I came across was a superb consultancy report from an organization called Citrix in the States, who had been talking to all kinds of opinion formers in order to get a handle on the future of work. And they came up with 4 scenarios. And it was, the role of AI. Does AI replace or enhance people? And what's the nature of organizations going forward? Are they traditional located organizations, or are they in the future going to be shared platforms that people can contribute to on a much more fluid and flexible basis? So the nature of employment will change as well. So that little 2x2 gives you 4 scenarios. And the point is that emerging landscape of the future of work was researched before the pandemic and is just as relevant after the pandemic. So again, there is this broader landscape of questions about the future of work. And what the pandemic has done is give greater urgency to some of those things and shifted the focus from one bit to another. But they're the same mega issues that existed before the pandemic.
Yes. So there's something about going into the, we're using this phrase post-pandemic that says, actually, your reality probably hasn't changed that much. The truth of the matter is, what was important before is important now, and the trends that existed probably still exist, but have been magnified or accelerated depending on where you are and what you're experiencing.
That's right. In a sense, for me, the metaphor is about, is there a reset button? And if you press the reset button post-pandemic, what are you resetting? Will the organization have a different purpose? Probably not. Will the organization have different products? Well, we try to innovate all the time. There's none that will, unless you're a specialist medical supplier, it's unlikely that the product mix will change because of the pandemic. What about location? Okay, well, now that is something we can reset, and what about the amount of time that we expect people to sort of show up physically versus show up virtually? That could be reset. But how do we reset it? Because on the one hand, we want to give people flexibility about where they do the work. But on the other hand, we want people to feel a part of an organization, part of a team, and share a corporate identity. So how do we reinforce that if more and more people are going to spend less and less time physically in the same place?
So I came up with 3 top tips as we sort of said, let's have this. I know. Well, I wrote them down as we were just sort of speaking before we got into this, which was, number 1 is listen deeply as an organization and as a leader. And what I mean by that is give people the experience of being heard. I think one of the things is people in senior roles can sometimes have listened, but that doesn't mean that people have even think you've necessarily heard them. And that might mean that you have to give them, in my mind, the symbolic act of replaying what you've heard, of saying, you know, I heard, and this is how that's now manifesting in something different. So I think there's something about taking the act of listening, be prepared to listen, be prepared to listen deeply, but show people that you've actually heard them. And I think that's something that is important, that if change, because of what's going to happen next in the next 2 points, if things change or don't change, I may or may not agree, but I have to feel as if I've been listened to. And I think that's really key. So listen deeply. Number 2, be prepared to change as an organization. Be prepared to change as a leader. And that might be that you've already been going through that. I've had to trust more. Well, why should that momentum stop? It's not you're out. So now you've topped off on your trust levels. It might be that if you give people a permission, you've given people permission to operate and a license to operate. Well, actually, if that just kept going, just because now you can call people back into the office, for example, what would happen if you just didn't? You know, being prepared to maybe see where the ball rolls. And I think not stopping certain momentums just because the context now is enabling you to let something either stop or be pulled back to where it was. So I think that being prepared to change, let the change run, and to see if it adds value at a level, because you're listening deeply, that says it might give me anxiety not to have everybody on view where I can see what they're doing. But actually hearing how happy everybody might be working from home, or some people want to come in. I know there's variables, but I'm going to leave it. I'm going to let it run. Be prepared for change. And the third one is, as a kind of interesting balance, to be prepared to change. Be prepared to hold space on what you know works.
Be prepared not to change.
Yeah. I know that's what everybody wants to do, but I think it's wrong. I've noticed for us, or for this team, that didn't work as well as we made it work. But when I think back to how it was, we were more innovative when we were together. Another team might go, well, actually, we've been so much more innovative when we've not been together. Oh, right. Well, then you've listened. You're prepared to change, but also be prepared not to change. Be prepared to put the logical argument for, I'm going to take us back, or I'm going to hold on that, because actually I don't believe, or I don't have the evidence. And I think the balance will be in not holding either of those positions fully. I'm not changing anything. I'm letting it all run, but getting the balance between what you're going to hold on to,
but if you think about
the stuff that you're going to let go.
If you think about your first and your last point, be prepared to listen and listen actively, and be prepared to hold the things that you also believe are true and good and worthwhile. If you think about it, that's the essence, isn't it, of a consultative and an involving style of leadership, right? So I'm just wondering, of your 3 points, be prepared to listen deeply, be prepared to change, and be prepared to hold the things that you know to be true. Would you have said anything different in 2018?
Interestingly enough, going back to what you were talking about, which is that, you know, good leadership is still good leadership. No, I wouldn't.
No, that's my point. I don't disagree with any of your points. All I believe is that,
yes,
you know, it would have been true in 2018. It probably would have been true, funnily enough, in 1918, if people had thought about it. But we lived in a much more authoritarian world then.
It'll be probably true in 100 years.
But go forward 50 years, in 1968, that thought was starting to emerge quite well, and now it's quite well established. So 2018 or 2021. I'd say those are some of the elements of good leadership.
Yeah, and I think if I'm manifesting what is good leadership, because that doesn't change, it is listen, it is be prepared to change, it is be prepared to hold space on your ideas. And I bring those into an extra focus now, because as we go into this space, I think when people, if you forget them or abuse them or don't pay attention to them at your own risk, because if it goes wrong, it'll be because you didn't listen. If it goes
That's
wrong,
right.
it'll be because you changed it back to how you wanted it to, even though other people, the evidence said that it was better, or it will fail because you didn't let it run and you weren't brave enough to just let things continue. So if
Yeah.
it goes wrong, it'll go wrong probably because of one of those three things.
That may well be the case. And the other thing I was going to say is that if you think about the distinctions between consulting people about their opinion, when you still say, but I'm going to make the decision.
Yeah.
Involving people in making the decision, so we'll decide together. And delegating, in which I will have some input, but you will make the decision on all of these issues, and whether or not you're actively listening, and you need to be in all of three of those, but you need also to be clear about where that decision is going to be taken and how.
Yes.
So that you're not selling people on a false prospectus. So what you don't want to be doing is saying, I really want to know what you think about location and working from home. And by the way, we're not going to do it. Yeah. That feels like a false prospectus. That's just a con. I mean, witting or unwitting. But the point is that the reason that leadership's hard is that you've got to balance so many different considerations and so many different constituencies' needs. And I think that the puzzle post-pandemic is, if I ask an individual, where would you like to work? Whatever the answer is, home, Starbucks, the office, whatever it may be, other coffees are available. But wherever people choose to say they want to work, that may suit them as an individual. Now, let's just back off a bit and talk about the team. What's going to make the team work best? So you've told me where you will work best. Where will the team work best?
Yeah.
Well, that may mean that you've got to come in a bit. Maybe either we've all got to go to the coffee shop, but something about physical proximity for the quality of teamwork might be a different answer. What about what makes us most innovative versus productive? So if we're not innovating, but we're just getting stuff out the door, it may well be that the location there gives you one answer. But if what you're trying to do is to innovate and be creative together, maybe proximity is important then. And then finally, there's the issue of what gives us a sense of corporate identity? Is it the badge? Is it the building? Is it the fact that, we all get together and do stuff together in an environment that we all enjoy working in and so on? So how do I balance those things? And it seems to me that it would be sensible to ask everybody about how you balance all those things.
Well, this is where then I think when I think about that, listen deeply, it's listen deeply to the very good questions you've asked. And I think, listening deeply doesn't mean, hey, anything you'd like to talk to me about, which is a lovely question. But I think actually what I'm hearing here, and I think adds absolute value to listen deeply, is ask high quality questions that have purpose and listen deeply.
Yeah.
And listen with the intent that you may go, do you know what? It may be the brave thing for me to let that run, even though I don't want to. The rest of this team are getting huge value from where we were or whatever to where we are. Yeah. But also I may need to listen deeply and be prepared to be brave enough to go, I have listened and on my shoulders be it, but no.
Yeah.
And that's always been the case with leaders. Ask a bloody great question, listen, and be prepared to hold to your position, but challenge yourself to do what you might be fearful of if the rest of the room and the wisdom of the crowd is offering you a potential possibility that may not sit well with you, but actually they want to own it and run with it. And that will always be a balance.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that people in authority have always had to do is to firstly come to a decision about how much individual freedom am I going to give to people. If I do have power, how much individual freedom am I prepared to give to people, and how does that fit in with the kind of corporate values, corporate purpose, and so on? And there's no doubt that you know, the mega trend through the 20th century and into the 21st century has been the democratization of leadership. So more people get more say in more things. So how much freedom am I going to give people to make their own decisions about that? But the thing about people in authority, people in power, is that they're sometimes the only mechanism for making sure that everybody gets what they need. You take the distinction. What do you need? You're probably the best judge of that, Guy. What do we need? Well, we need to talk about it. What does the world that, if we're in a big organization, what gets the organization as a whole what it needs? Well, it may be that someone's got to do an awful lot of deep listening, as you say, a lot of deep thinking, and then make a decision about the considerations that are important. And what I'm thinking about is a very specific issue. So if I think about where do I work most productively, I think the answer to that for me is at home. I can divvy my day up into whichever bits I like. I can take exercise when I like, and I can make sure that I get things out of the door on the schedule that I'm supposed to, and so on. No problem. But the moment there's a we involved, the individual freedoms have to be somehow not necessarily curtailed, but certainly compromised.
Balanced.
Say again?
Balanced,
a nice word. But it may be that the balancing mechanism requires just a little bit of formal authority, and I'm thinking about, my thesis is that good leadership has always been good leadership. And long before the pandemic, when I was still running a consulting company, one of the things that consultants do, and you know this yourself from your own experience, is we travel a lot. We're all over the place all the time. So what we used to do, we used to have the first Monday of every month, everybody's in the office. Do not go do client work on the first Monday of every month. You can do it any other time you like, but not that day. That's for us to be together. And we shared information and we talked to each other. And if there was nothing much to do, we just hung out together and had lunch together. And the office used to buzz and be full. And occasionally people would complain, "Oh, I got to come all the way from London to Bristol in order to, sit down and just have lunch with everybody." Yes, is the answer. You do. Why? Because this is a big team. It's a big family. This is us, and you need never to forget who us is. Yeah. It's this lot, And so we are. So we used to have this kind of rule. And I can imagine organizations post-pandemic saying, you can work from home, 3-4 days a week, but, 1 day a week you've got to be in. Or I could imagine them doing the kind of first Monday of the month or whatever it may be. But there are some purposes that only being together can serve. And I think that that's something that maybe leaders have to make a judgment about.
And, for me on closing, when I look into the press and I'm reading the news and I'm not hearing it firsthand, so I'm not even going to pretend that it's accurate. But when I hear things like, for example, a Goldman Sachs say everybody will be coming back into the office, and I'm sure somebody from Goldman Sachs is saying, well, we never said that. But just as a statement, there are some companies that are going, we're all back in the office.
Yeah.
I'm like, can it really be that simple? Have you listened? Have you asked the right questions? Are you prepared to do some change that go, yeah, some of us will need to be back in the office, or a hybrid version of that, but these blanket statements of, right, we're not going back in the office, or yes, we are going back in the office. Well, I can't go back in the office. I've got to stay in my 1-bedroom apartment with my other half where it's noisy, driving me bonkers. I really want to go back into the office. So, again, everybody's truths are different. And I think that will be the balance. So I think for me, post-pandemic, I said listen deeply, but what I should add to that now is listen deeply with the understanding that you've asked a question that's then worth listening to the reply on. And then, and be prepared to change, and be prepared also to hold space, but from the lens of you've listened, you've asked questions, and picking up on your point. And that's because, you know what, good leadership has always been good leadership.
Yeah. I think so. So for me, the one contentious issue is going to be location.
Yeah.
But that's not a new issue. It's just a current issue.
Yeah. So I think that'll be the thing. So listen, thank you for that. As we do these, some of our conversations are broader, some of them are a little bit tighter, but this is one of those ones that I think it's do what you know good looks like, do that well, and that craft that exists, post-pandemic, lean into the craft and do the stuff that we know at all times, doesn't matter what the situation is, good, we know what it looks like.
Yeah. That's
Great.
right.
Okay, I'm going to press that stop button.